Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons 5e as it happens. Today's topic is the Player's Guide to the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. And with a Player's Guide, there are no spoilers. I have done my best to make sure I do not include spoilers that will ruin the adventure for you and make your Dungeon Master very angry. I don't want to do that. Do not anger the Dungeon Master. That is the task for today. Now, this is more about the players rather than the Dungeon Masters in terms of a guide, but I'm hoping that everybody will find something useful in this video. Whether you are a player or a Dungeon Master, I'm hoping that Dungeon Masters will share this video with their players, particularly if they are in the process of playing the game or about to start running the game. I really want to be clear about my point of view with regard to the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I hate this adventure as a Dungeon Master with a vengeance. I really despise it. When I ran it, it was so much trouble. But I want to make it clear that my players really generally enjoyed themselves. They had a good time. They could see issues within the story structure that had nothing to do with my dungeon mastering. They could acknowledge that, they could see it, but they still had a good time. The first thing to know is that the adventure is pretty awful. It has a weak story and structure. And when I say weak story and structure, I mean like crazy bad. That's how bad it is, which I know bunch of you will probably be saying, that sounds very strange. I don't understand. It's like the first adventure that was released for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, short of the adventure book from the starter kit. So what's going on there? Well, my personal opinion, but I still feel it is a very weak story. The adventure is super linear, very, very linear, with really no significant player choices throughout it. In fact, if players try to make choices and make decisions, that's going to actually cause an awful lot of trouble for everybody, not just the Dungeon Master. My advice to you as a player is follow your Dungeon Master clues. Their prompts or the campaign will crash and burn. It has a very simple and obvious adventure hook, but unfortunately, for some strange reason, I don't know why, somehow our designers for this adventure have managed to sabotage the whole thing with pointless road trips and meaningless and very boring non-player characters. I don't know how that's possible, not with you a professional designer. Kobold Press has got a really good name, so what was going on, I do not know. Don't forget the adventure quest goal. I know I said it was really simple and obvious, but for some strange reason, due to a variety of different things, it's really easy to forget what your adventure goal is on this railroad. It is essentially a railroad, that's what it is, but you will actually forget what the goal is. And it's a product of a lot of different things, and I will explain, but generally it's just frustration, boredom, and in some cases just annoyance, driving the players nutty, and they start forgetting what they're actually trying to achieve in the first place. So just be warned, be really careful about that. People really like the idea of playing this adventure, and primarily it's because Tiamat is in there, the main villain, and it smells of dragons. When you say something like the tyranny of dragons, that means there's got to be lots and lots of dragons in there. Well, there's not necessarily going to be lots and lots of dragons in there, and the evil queen of dragons. What could be more exciting? So this is often a big draw. Now, so if that's the draw for you as a player, I want to warn you that there are some things you need to do to make it successful. You cannot rely on your Dungeon Master to do all the work, otherwise this adventure will be very short. Things like teamwork, thinking smart are going to increase your chances of success. It's actually very easy to wind up failing and having some significant problems early on if you don't use teamwork and think smart. You're going to have to make some really hard choices that you really weren't expecting. The adventure has a lot of combat that's quite grindy in some of the chapters, And this is so grindy, in fact, that even the slayers within your group, those players who love combat, may in fact start getting bored. It's very easy for players to derail this adventure by being silly, by getting bored or frustrated. Essentially, just a light breeze could fell the entire adventure campaign tree if you're not careful. There are adventure-specific backgrounds and bonds in the back of the adventure book for individual characters, and I really want you to use them. So go and ask your dungeon master if they haven't been using them, and see if you can actually include them into your character. They will help significantly help bond you to the adventure and help with some of the other issues that I've talked about. Often you'll find a dungeon master will find it easier to let this Derailed Tyranny of Dragons campaign end rather than try and find a solution. Now, if you've got a really, really competent, experienced dungeon master and they've managed to find a way forward, wonderful, that's great news. There are very few fixes for a derailed campaign of this nature. This is often due to designers' experimental rail track. I don't know how you can make an adventure so railroady that all you have to do is a slight nudge and the whole thing comes off the track. But apparently that's entirely possible, and I can't count the number of times people have mentioned how difficult it is to get back on. So I want you to be really understanding with your dungeon master. If they come to you one day after something's taken place that has sort of derailed the campaign, and they say, look, I can't figure out how to solve this, I'm just going to end the campaign, it's just too much hard work. Because there are so many times when this will come up. So be really understanding with your dungeon master if you don't get through the whole thing. I want you to consider being very patient with everything that goes on in this adventure, because the adventure really demands it, and it demands it from a player constantly. Otherwise, really things will go badly. One of the biggest issues you'll find is anybody who's playing a greedy character. Greedy characters will likely burn the whole story, send it to hell for everybody. The problem with including something like the word hoard, which in the title, right, is that sort of suggests big treasure hoard. So what I want you to imagine is, imagine somebody says there's a hoard of the Dragon Queen. Imagine there's a hoard of treasure and you cannot touch it. Under no circumstances. That's what I want you to visualize in your mind when you're playing this game. If you can stick with that, things will go all right. Combat is often the wrong action for a few situations, particularly in some of the areas in the adventure or parts of the adventure that really are looking for you to use your character as an infiltration unit. So infiltrate, find out the information you require, and move on. Make smart decisions, because this adventure expects you to be a veteran player. It's one of those adventures which really isn't really suitable for new players, which is why I always tend to recommend The Lost Mine of Phandelver as your first foray into Dungeons & Dragons if you've never played the game before. So a veteran player will understand what's taking place, and they'll be able to figure out how to do a lot of these things. That doesn't save them from some of the consequences, but really I feel like this whole adventure was designed for very experienced dungeon masters and very experienced veteran players rather than newbies. Combat encounters are not always fair or balanced. In fact, they are the absolute reverse of that. There are wild variations in difficulty. You're going to get stuff that's very hard or literally almost impossible, and some stuff that's very easy and could well be the same sort of stuff over and over again. The beginning of the adventure in particular, through design and error, has absolutely impossible situations that cannot be solved by your character. And if you want to survive, engaging in combat will be the last thing that you wind up doing. So be warned. It takes anywhere from about 6 months to about a year playing on a regular basis. If you play roughly, I would say every week for maybe 2 hours, you should get through it in about 6 months. I've heard of some people who've taken about a year to play through. That might have simply been because there's been a lot of party discussions and stuff like that, but it can take a fair amount of chunk of time. The book is actually quite short. There's actually not too much to it, but in terms of putting it forward and making it work, it doesn't seem to work out quite the way you would expect. So your timing is roughly half a year to a year. Now the good news for those of you who want some good news, and that is that the follow-up book or adventure from the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, The Rise of Tiamat, is a much better story, vastly better, with lots more options available for players. So you actually have a lot more player choice. And I feel like it is a much more in-depth adventure. It's pretty tough for a dungeon master to run, but it doesn't suffer the sorts of problems that Hoard of the Dragon Queen suffers from. And both of these adventures, Hoard of the Dragon Queen and The Rise of Tiamat, are really light on information. So if you are trying to ask a lot of information regarding locations that you go to, you're going to find your dungeon master probably has zero to no information unless they've done additional homework. And literally they have to do all that homework because there is nothing in the adventure for them to really work with, nothing of any significance. Now I'm hoping you've found this video helpful. I know it sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, but I want to make it clear that the issue is more for getting the dungeon master to make it work. And as long as you have a group of players who work together and understand that they're dealing with a very fragile piece of glass, this adventure, you will have a good time, because my players had a good time. And I've talked to many other groups and they had a good time as well. It's just going to be quite stressful for the dungeon master because they just don't know what's going to happen and how to make it more appealing to you. They will have to do a bit of work. So not all doom and gloom, but some things to remember. Remember, fragile piece of glass. Now, if you are looking for other videos that you might be interested in, more content, I have stuff for players and dungeon masters covering every aspect of the game. You're welcome to go and check that out. I have a very small series of videos more designed for dungeon masters on how to run Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I've only got the first couple of chapters there, but you might find that useful if you're a dungeon master, or at least point your dungeon master towards those videos to make their lives a little bit easier when they're running the adventure for you. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing videos like this, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. Now, you can support me by using Patreon. I have a Patreon page where you get access to all of my live streams and other content. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, and you'll find a merchandise shelf down underneath all of my videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.